She sat next to me so naturally. I had no idea she was an alien princess. The transit pass arrived in his mailbox on a Tuesday, tucked between a water bill and a coupon for a pizza place that had closed 3 years ago. No return address, no postage mark, just a matte black card with Marcus's name embossed in silver letters and a single line of text printed beneath. Your journey has been approved. Marcus Acaffer turned it over twice, checked the envelope again, and then did what any rational 34-year-old civil engineer living alone in a city of 4 million would do. He set it on the kitchen counter beside his keys, made coffee, and forgot about it until the next morning when he couldn't find his regular transit card and was already late. The black card was right there. He grabbed it, shoved it in his coat pocket, and ran for the train. The card worked. The reader beeped green without hesitation. The turnstile swung open like it had been expecting him specifically. He thought briefly that he should look into how he'd gotten onto a wait list for a new transit program he hadn't applied for. He thought about it for the duration of the escalator ride down to the platform, and then he stopped thinking about it because the 7:42 was already pulling in, and he had a site inspection brief due by 9. He thought nothing of the card. He thought everything of her. She was already seated when he boarded, tucked into the second-to-last window seat with a canvas tote bag on her lap and a pair of earbuds in. She was looking out the window at the dark tunnel wall, and the tunnel's reflection showed her face back to Marcus in ghostly outline. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw set like she was solving a difficult equation, eyes the color of deep water in winter. Not blue, not green. Something that moved between them and never quite settled. He sat across the aisle. He didn't stare. He was good at not staring. He had lived in this city for 11 years and had elevated not staring to something close to professional discipline. She was there the next morning. Same seat, same tote bag, earbuds in. And the morning after that. And the morning after that. By the end of the second week, Marcus had cataloged 17 small things about her without consciously meaning to. The way an engineer catalogs stress points in a structure, not because they're looking for failure, but because precision is a habit that doesn't turn off. The way she always carried exactly one book and never opened it. The way she mouthed words silently when the train went dark in the long tunnel under the river, not singing, something else, something with too many syllables, and a rhythm that didn't follow any pattern he recognized. The way she ordered the same coffee at the station kiosk every morning, black, medium. And how she always looked slightly surprised when it tasted like coffee, as if each cup was an independent experience that hadn't benefited from the memory of the last. He hadn't spoken to her. That was fine. That was the correct behavior. You don't speak to people on the train. That was the first and most fundamental rule of city living, and Marcus had kept it faithfully through 2 apartments and 3 job sites, and the entire geography of his adult life. He spoke to her on a Wednesday in November, when the train lurched hard between stations and her bag fell into the aisle, and everything inside scattered across the floor. He moved on instinct, the same instinct that moved him toward a structural fault before he consciously registered it. He picked up a pen. A folded piece of paper with a diagram on it in a hand he couldn't read. A small smooth stone the color of bleached bone. A compact mirror. And a device he did not recognize, palm-sized, matte black like the transit card he had in his own pocket, emitting a faint hum that he could feel in his back teeth more than hear, like a frequency just below the range where it becomes sound. He handed everything back. She took each item with both hands, which he noticed because nobody does that anymore, and said, "Thank you," in a voice that was very careful and precise and slightly too musical, like she had learned the phrase from a recording and was pleased with how accurately she was reproducing it. "No problem," he said. She looked at him then full on, and he felt it in his sternum the way you feel a bass note from a speaker that's too close. Something was assessing him. Not rudely, not coldly, but with a thoroughness that made him feel briefly transparent. like she was reading terms and conditions. "You've been observing me," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement delivered with the same flat accuracy you'd use to confirm a bus stop. "I know," he paused. "A little, I'm sorry." "Don't be," she said. "I've been observing you too." The train started moving again. She put the earbuds back in. He sat back down. For reasons he chose not to examine until much later, he felt better after that conversation than he had in several months. Her name was Sira. He learned that the following Friday when she sat next to him instead of across from him, without explanation or preamble, and introduced herself the way children do, first name only, no handshake, just the word offered out plainly like a gift that's not wrapped. "Marcus," he said. "I know," she said. "You have a name tag on your work bag." He looked. He did. A laminated card in a plastic sleeve that said MARCUSOKAFOR/Structural Engineering, HARBOURLINE projects. He'd had it there for 3 years and had genuinely never once thought about it. "What do you do?" she asked. "Civil engineering, infrastructure mostly, bridges." He paused. "You?" She considered the question for slightly too long, not rudely, more like she was selecting from a menu she was still reading. "Research," she said. "Comparative sociology." "What are you comparing?" Another pause. "This," she said, and gestured at the train car around them, at the man asleep against the window with his mouth open, the teenager doing homework on her phone, the elderly woman in the corner clutching a Department of Motor Vehicles appointment card like it might try to escape. "People," he said. "The way people are with each other," she said, "when nobody thinks anyone is watching." He nodded. He knew people who did that kind of work. He asked her about methodology, and she answered in a way that was technically coherent but somehow slightly off-register, like she was translating on the fly from a framework that didn't have a clean equivalent for control group or sample bias. Like the concepts were real to her, but the English terminology for them was approximate. He liked talking to her. He was surprised by how much. He hadn't talked to someone on the train in 11 years. They rode together every morning for 6 weeks before Marcus admitted to himself that he had begun to restructure his morning around the 7:42, that he had stopped considering the 7:55 as an option regardless of how the previous evening had gone. He didn't say this out loud to anyone. He filed it under routine and left it there. He learned things about her the way you learn the topology of a city, one street at a time. No map, no deliberate survey, just attention accumulated over distance. He learned that she drank coffee only because it seemed to be expected and culturally significant in ways she was still mapping, and that she found the actual flavor bewildering. He learned that she owned exactly 4 pairs of shoes and had a considered opinion about which direction rivers should flow through urban planning grids. He learned she had no emotional opinion at all about television, food brands, sports teams, or popular music, but could hold a sustained and genuinely absorbing conversation about structural engineering materials, fluid dynamics, the mathematics of musical composition, the neuroscience of human grief, or the reason certain architectural spaces made people feel small and others made them feel held. He learned that she laughed at things 3 to 4 seconds after they were funny, as if she needed to process the joke first, run it through something, before the response arrived, and that when she laughed the sound was so genuine and so unguarded that people near them on the train involuntarily looked up and smiled without knowing why. He learned that she read everything: newspapers, restaurant menus, the small print on transit authority safety notices, architectural signage, with the same focused attention, as if no text was beneath her and all of it was, on some level, field data. He did not learn where she lived. He did not learn where she was from. Every time either question arose naturally in conversation, she deflected it with such practiced fluency that the first 3 times he didn't notice it happening until several minutes later, when the thread of conversation had moved on, and he was standing on a platform watching the train pull away thinking, "Wait, she didn't answer that. He thought she is private, fair, I'm also private. I have kept the same apartment for 6 years, and told exactly nobody at my job what it looks like. He didn't think she is not from here. Not yet." The first sign he dismissed outright was the compass. He was showing her a site map on his phone, a harbor bridge project, Eastern District, 12 months out from ground break, and needed to orient the map to true north. He pulled up the phone's compass function and it spun, calibrating, and then spun again. And again. It wouldn't lock. It kept rotating towards Sierra, slow and steady, like a satellite dish finding a signal. "Your phone needs calibrating," she said. "Yeah," he said and shook it. It locked to north. He thought nothing more of it until that evening when he remembered and shook it again in his kitchen, alone, and it locked immediately and held. He put his phone down and made dinner and watched the news and went to bed. The second sign took longer to dismiss. They were at the station kiosk. He had started buying her coffee somewhere around week 8 because she perpetually forgot money, which he found charming until he found himself wondering how a sociologist conducting urban field research perpetually forgot her wallet. But it had become ritual, and ritual is its own answer, and the espresso machine behind the counter made a sound it had not made before. A high, oscillating tone, sustained and clean, not like a malfunction, like a transmission. Every person within 20 feet winced and covered their ears. Sierra turned toward the machine with the particular quality of attention she sometimes had: focused, precise, minimal visible expression, and the sound stopped. Not faded out, stopped, like a switch. "Static electricity," the barista said, frowning at the machine and pressing a reset panel. Sierra turned back to Marcus and accepted her coffee with both hands. He opened his mouth. He closed it again. The third sign was not subtle, and he told himself for approximately 9 days that he had imagined it before he stopped bothering with that particular lie. It was a Friday in December, dark by 5, and they had fallen into the habit of the evening commute together now, not just morning. He'd restructured his day around it without ever discussing it explicitly, which told him something about himself that he chose to treat as background noise. They were on the southbound platform waiting for the 5:40, the platform crowded with the end-of-week density of people who had already mentally left the building, when a man came off the escalator moving fast and badly, wrong weight distribution, high agitation, hands wrong, and grabbed a woman's phone mid-stride without slowing. The woman shouted. People turned. The man was already past the barrier gates heading for the north exit. The security camera above the gate swiveled. Not panned, swiveled. A full 160 degrees, moving in the direction cameras do not move, with a mechanical precision that didn't fit the equipment. The man's feet went out from under him on a floor that was completely flat and completely dry, and he went down hard enough to lose the phone. A transit officer came from the side corridor at a run, arriving 30 seconds later with the camera still pointing where it shouldn't have been able to point. Coincidence? Timing? A loose cable in the camera housing, a wet patch invisible to Marcus but obviously there. He looked at Sierra. She was watching the officer help the woman retrieve her phone. Her expression was neutral, calm, entirely normal. And there was something at the rim of her iris. A faint luminescence, cold and blue-white, there and then not there, so fast Marcus would have called it a trick of the fluorescent lighting, except that the fluorescent lighting on Platform 9 had never done that before. "Did you?" "He tripped," she said. "Right. People trip. On dry, flat floors." She met his eyes and held them for exactly as long as it took Marcus to decide that pushing this particular question tonight, in the middle of a Friday platform crowd, was not the right structural approach. Then the train arrived and they boarded, and she told him about a paper she was reviewing on urban pedestrian flow dynamics, and he let the conversation carry him away from it, but he didn't lose it. He filed it in the same place. He'd filed the compass and the espresso machine, and the device in her bag that hummed against his teeth. He lay awake that night and made the list. The way engineers make lists, systematically, in columns, following the load path of the logic wherever it led without letting preference determine the destination. The compass, the espresso machine, the camera on platform 9, the device. The way she learned words like she was learning recipes functionally without sentiment for the ingredients. The 4-second laugh delay. The eyes that were not quite a color. The fact that in 9 months of daily conversation she had never once mentioned a home address, a hometown, a childhood memory, a parent, a sibling, a friend who predated the train. The way she held things with both hands. The way she went motionless, not still like a person standing still, but motionless like a recording paused, when she was processing something important. He looked at the list for a long time. He thought about the transit card in his pocket. Your journey has been approved. He went to sleep. In the morning she was already at the kiosk and had bought him coffee, which she had never done before, and she handed it to him with both hands the way she always did, and he looked at her face in the gray December light and thought, I know what the list means. I'm just not going to say it until she's ready to say it. He took the coffee. He drank it standing on the platform. It was terrible because he'd started taking it black, the way she ordered hers, and he didn't like it black. You're quiet, she said. Thinking about a bridge, he said, which was true. He had been simultaneously thinking about the list and about a bridge. Which one? One I haven't designed yet, he paused. A footbridge, pedestrian only, harbor district, too small to matter economically. He looked at the tracks, easy to build beautifully. She was quiet beside him, and in the quiet he heard her pull one earbud out and leave the other in, which he'd learned was her way of being present without committing to presence. And he found it, as he found most things about her, more endearing than he had any structural justification for. The 7:42 arrived. Her handler found Marcus first. Specifically, he appeared at the kiosk on a Thursday when Marcus was alone and early, wearing a second-hand jacket and a hat that was slightly too large and a smile that was slightly too wide, the smile of someone performing the concept of relaxation. You are Marcus Okafor, the man said, not a question, the same declarative register Sierra used when she was certain. Who are you? You can call me Hare. He sat down on the bench next to Marcus without being invited, the way people sit down when they know they won't be asked to leave. I'm Sierra's colleague, handler. We don't have a clean translation into your professional vocabulary for what I am. Marcus held his coffee with both hands and said nothing. I'm going to tell you something, Hare said. I'd like you to sit with it without processing it out loud. Don't ask me to repeat it. Don't ask me to prove it immediately. Just receive it. He adjusted his hat. Are you ready? I don't know you. You know Sierra. That's the relevant credential. He looked at Marcus with the same full-on, fine-print treating assessment Marcus now recognized. She's not from here. Marcus said nothing. From here meaning this city, this country, this planet. You understand what I'm indicating? I don't. You do. And Marcus did. He had the list. He had had the list for 3 weeks and had been stopping himself at the last step, the engineering step, the step where you follow the load path wherever it leads regardless of whether the destination is the one you expected. He had been standing at that threshold for 3 weeks. He put his coffee down. Okay, he said. She is the 7th daughter of the Vethara ascendancy, Hare said, quietly, watching the escalators with the professional calm of someone who has watched many exits. That translates imperfectly as princess in your framework. The Vethara don't have hereditary aristocracy. Their hierarchy is cognitive and functional. Her classification places her in the governing tier. She ranks roughly between a Supreme Court justice and a general in your equivalent terms, with the added dimension that her role carries something your culture doesn't have a precise word for, something between sacred obligation and load-bearing structural function. And she's on my commuter train. She requested field immersion, comparative xenosociology, your species, specifically. Your planet has been under observation for a long time. How long? Hare tilted his head. Define long in geological terms and I can answer precisely. In human cultural terms, longer than Rome. Marcus absorbed this with the steadiness of someone who has spent a career discovering that structures he trusted were doing more complicated things than his initial models suggested. And she's studying me specifically, he said. She was supposed to study the aggregate, population behavioral data under environmental stress, your species' extraordinary capacity for community formation under duress, your contradiction of being simultaneously the most destructive and most creative organisms in the catalogued galaxy. He paused. She was not supposed to develop, she was supposed to remain a non-participatory observer. He paused again. She has submitted 3 extension requests. She has been here 9 months against a 6-month protocol. Marcus felt something happen in his chest that he was not going to examine, while sitting on a transit platform bench next to a person who was apparently not from this solar system. "Why are you telling me this?" he said. Hare looked at the escalators, looked at his hat brim, looked at Marcus. Because the Sovereign Council, the governing body of the Ascendancy, has authorized a retrieval, today, 6 p.m. He let that sit for a moment. Standard retrieval protocol for an integrated immersion includes a memory suppression procedure upon departure. Both parties, meaning you would not remember this, meaning she would not remember why she was reluctant to leave. She would return to the Ascendancy with 9 months of field data and no personal recollection of the reason for 3 extension requests. Marcus was very quiet. "When you say both parties," he said, "you have been documented as an integrated research contact. You're in her field reports. Your name appears in her council submissions." Hare was matter-of-fact about this, the way a person is matter-of-fact when delivering information they have decided is more useful than withheld. Yes, both parties. The train arrived. When Marcus turned to ask another question, the bench was empty. Not vacated, empty. No figure retreating through the crowd, no oversized hat visible at any escalator. Just the bench and the platform and the arriving train and Marcus Ockafer with a half-drunk coffee and the largest structural problem of his career. He boarded the train alone that morning. He thought about bridges. He thought about load tolerances and what you do when the math tells you a structure is failing and you have a specific number of hours to engineer an alternative. He thought about the list and about the transit card and the word approved, and what it meant that the card had worked, and whether something larger than a transit system had beeped green and swung the gate open. He thought about her voice in the dark of the tunnel under the river, 9 months on a planet with ground. He didn't tell her what Hare had said, not immediately. Understanding was a slow machine in Marcus, thorough and heavy, but it got there, and he needed it to get there before he opened a conversation that would not be a small conversation. He thought about what it meant to be 7th-tier cognitive hierarchy in a fleet culture and to choose a commuter train. He thought about the book in the language he couldn't read. He thought about the mirror in her bag and the device, and the stone the color of bone. He thought about the morning on a bridge inspection when he'd said the structure is trying to tell you something. You have to know how to listen. And she had gone completely still and said, "Yes, exactly. That's exactly it," in the voice of someone who has just heard their own interior experience articulated in a language they didn't expect from a source they didn't expect. He brought her to the bridge. Not the site, the finished one, the Elmore Street span 2 miles upriver, which he visited sometimes the way some people visit churches. Not for any belief exactly, but for the quality of the air and the particular silence at the center. He had designed it 5 years ago and fought the aesthetic brief through 3 rounds of cost review and built it more beautifully than it needed to be, with a cable curve that followed the same geometry as water running over stone. She stood at the rail in the December cold and looked at the river for a long time. "You built this," she said. "My team." "You designed the form." "Yes." "Why is it beautiful?" she said. "Structurally, there is no functional reason for this curvature. The cables could be straight. Straight is more efficient. You added weight and cost for something that doesn't improve load distribution." "It improves something," he said. "People respond to it." "The form follows a mathematics older than engineering. The same curve water makes over stone, the same arc a bird uses in a banking turn. People recognize it without knowing why. The bridge feels like it belongs to the landscape instead of imposing on it." He paused. "When I was 23, I crossed a bridge that felt wrong. Too angular, too industrial, every surface asserting itself. I had a fear response, pure animal, nothing cognitive. My body thought the structure was hostile." He looked at the cables. "I don't build bridges that feel hostile." She turned to look at him with her winter water eyes, and the light came across her face, and she said, "Marcus." "Yes. I need to tell you something." "I know," he said. "Hair found me." The quality of stillness that came over her then was different from the everyday variety, deeper. The recording paused at something significant. "When?" she said. "This morning." "Then today is." "Yes." She turned back to the river. Her hands were flat on the railing, both of them, and her knuckles had gone pale with the cold or with something else. "I should have told you," she said. "I know that." "Yes." "I was going to. I kept." She stopped. "In my framework, disclosure of identity in a field immersion is a protocol violation. It invalidates the integrity of the observational data. I was required to be invisible, non-participatory. I was not supposed to, you weren't supposed to be interesting." He laughed, genuine, unheld, surprised by itself. "I'm a bridge engineer with a name tag on his bag. I'm profoundly uninteresting." "You build structures that look like nature so that strangers won't be afraid of them," she said, and turned to him. And the practice neutrality was gone now, all of it. 9 months of performed civilian calm dissolved, and what was underneath was wider and older and not entirely human, but was also the most real thing he had ever seen on a face. "You told me once that your job is solving the problem of how to cross something you can't go through. I thought about that for 3 weeks. I put it in my reports. My committee flagged it as a culturally significant data point. The mathematics of connection in a species too proud to swim." The river moved below them. A barge passed, slow and low in the water. "Are they coming today?" he said. 6 o'clock, platform 9. "And if you're there when they arrive?" "I'm brought back, memory suppression at departure." Her voice was even. "It's standard protocol. There's no malice in it. It's hygiene for the research integrity." "For the data." "For the integrity of the yes." She looked at the water. "Yes." He stood beside her at the rail and looked at the river and thought about bridges, and about load paths, and about the specific problem of a structure that needs to hold something it wasn't originally designed for. "What do you want, Sira?" he said. She was quiet for a long time. Long enough for a couple to cross the bridge behind them, arm in arm, their conversation unintelligible from here. Long enough for a flock of starlings to move across the sky in one of those impossible shifting formations that has no center and no leader, and follows a mathematics no individual bird understands. "I want to stay," she said. "That is not a small statement in my framework. I have obligations they're not like your citizenship obligations. They're genetic structural. I'm 7th tier Vethara. My leaving would be like a load-bearing column deciding it preferred to be decorative." She paused. "I want to stay." "Those aren't contradictory things," he said. "My counsel would." Your counsel isn't on this bridge, he said. She looked at her hands on the rail. You'd have to know about me, she said quietly, after. If I stay, if I can negotiate a reclassification, there would be full disclosure. You'd be a registered contact on record with the ascendancy. There are protocols. There are implications. She paused. It's not a small thing to know. I already know, he said. I've known for weeks. I was waiting for you to trust me with it. She was silent. The compass never lied, he said. I just didn't want to push you. Something happened in her face, not a human expression exactly, but something that was doing the same work, the specific release of pressure held for too long. Marcus, she said. Yes. I need you to come with me to the station. They took the train, of course. The 5:40 Red Line southbound, their train, the one they had shared for 9 months without ever naming it as such. She sat next to him, and he put his coffee cup on the seat between them, not because there wasn't space, but because he wanted something normal there, something ordinary and persistent between them in the last half hour before whatever was coming. She was nervous. He could tell because she had stopped performing not being nervous. Her hands were in her lap and she was counting something on her fingers very faintly, and her eyes had gone all the way to the winter end of the spectrum, deep and still, and not moving between colors anymore, just settled there like a decision. Tell me something real, he said. I've only told you real things, she said. Tell me something I don't know. She thought about it. The train went dark in the long tunnel under the river. My home, she said in the dark carefully, was destroyed before I was born. There was a conflict, we have a word for it that means collective structural failure, which is more accurate than war. My planet's surface was made uninhabitable. We've been a fleet culture for 3 generations. We live in ships. We have no ground. She paused. When I stepped off the transit platform onto your street the first morning of this assignment, actual ground, actual bedrock under my feet, I stood still for 40 seconds. My handler was alarmed. I was just feeling it. She paused again. I've spent 9 months on a planet that has a ground. In the dark of the tunnel, Marcus found her hand and held it. She didn't pull away. Her hand was warmer than he expected, significantly warmer, a temperature that was not feverish exactly but was simply running at a different baseline. And the faint hum he'd felt from the device in her bag was in her skin too, very faint, very steady, like a carrier signal. We have a lot of ground, he said. We give it away constantly. We pave it over and park cars on it and build car parks in the middle of places that could be parks. We don't appreciate it. I know, she said. That's in my field notes. The train came out of the tunnel into the cold overhead fluorescence of the underground station. Platform 9 next stop, the speaker said. She didn't let go of his hand. The Sovereign Council's retrieval team were not visible as retrieval agents. They were 4 figures in gray civilian clothing, standing at precisely calibrated intervals across Platform 9, each one at a position that geometrically covered every exit, every escalator, every emergency corridor. Marcus had designed enough security schematics to recognize a coordinated perimeter without needing it labeled. He didn't know if they had weapons. He suspected the answer was yes, and that weapons was not the right vocabulary. Hare was at the far end of the platform wearing his oversized hat, hands in his jacket pockets, and he looked at Marcus with an expression that sat exactly between approval and apology. Sierra stopped when she saw the formation. Just stopped in the middle of the platform, among the ordinary commuters who had no idea, who were going home to their dinners, their disagreements, their television schedules, their entirely ordinary Tuesday evenings on a planet with ground they had never once thought to be grateful for. She stood in all of it and looked at it in a way that Marcus understood now as the look of someone memorizing. I need you to wait here, she said. No, he said. Marcus. No, he said it the same way the second time, simply. She looked at him with Winterwater eyes. He walked with her. The lead agent was tall, gray, with a face that had the quality of a very good translation close, but the rhythm was slightly off. He spoke in a language Marcus didn't understand, clipped and official. Sierra responded at length, measured, not submissive. Marcus stood at her left shoulder and did not move. The agent turned to look at him, then at Sierra, then at Marcus again with the fine print assessment he was beginning to recognize as something universal in this people. He addressed Marcus in English, which was startling in its precision. "You are aware of the subject's identity?" "Yes." "And of the retrieval protocol?" "Yes." "Then you understand that your presence in this—" "I'm a civil engineer," Marcus said. "I build infrastructure. Specifically, I build bridges, structures whose entire purpose is to connect points that cannot otherwise be connected without going through something that cannot be crossed directly." He paused. "I'm telling you that the connection documented in her field reports is a load-bearing structural element, and that removing it without engineering a proper alternative will cause a failure you haven't modeled for." The agent looked at him. "I'm also telling you," Marcus said, "that she is not a data set, she is a person, and persons don't undergo memory suppression without consent. That's not a cultural difference. That's a line." A silence, the kind that is weight. Sierra said something in her language quickly, and the agent responded, and Sierra said something longer, and the exchange became a negotiation, back and forth, each holding a position, each testing the other's structural tolerance. Marcus couldn't follow the language, but he could read the rhythm of it, and it was not going badly. Hair drifted over. He stood next to Marcus at the edge of the conversation, watching, speaking quietly out of the corner of his mouth. "She's invoking Precedent 9, he said. "A provision in Vethara Accord law that allows a field researcher to petition for extended immersion if they can demonstrate that personal integration has produced epistemologically significant data that could not have been obtained through standard non-participatory observation." He paused. "It's been successfully invoked twice in 300 years of Vethara field research." "Those aren't good odds," Marcus said. "She's the seventh ascendant," Hare said. "She has the cognitive standing to make the argument at the highest tier. Whether the council accepts it depends on the data." He looked sideways at Marcus. "Your data, specifically." Marcus looked at the negotiation, at Sierra holding her position with the steadiness of a load-bearing column that had decided it preferred, in fact, to remain exactly where it was. He stepped forward. The agent turned. "The research contact," Marcus said. "That's me. I'm in her reports." He didn't wait for confirmation. "What does Vethara protocol define as epistemologically significant data? I'd like to argue the value of mine." The agent was very still. 9 months of daily sustained close-range observational contact, Marcus said. "Not surveillance, conversation. Genuine exchange." "That's not what your field protocol was designed to capture. You can monitor body language and group behavior and stress responses from a distance. You cannot get from surveillance what she got from sitting next to me on the same train for 9 months and talking about bridges." He paused. "You want to understand humans. I'm a human. And I'm telling you the most important thing your field notes won't contain is this. We form bonds that exceed rational utility. We attach without strategic purpose. We hold the door for strangers. We build bridges more beautifully than they need to be because beauty is a structural component of human function. We will stand on a platform at 6 p.m. and argue with a retrieval team for a person we met on a train." He stopped. "That's not sentiment. That's data. And you can't get it from a distance." A silence. Hare made a sound, very soft, that Marcus recognized as his version of laughter. Sierra was looking at Marcus with an expression he hadn't seen before and didn't have a name for, the expression of someone watching a structure bear the weight they put on it and hold, when they had not been certain it would hold. The negotiation resumed. Marcus stepped back. He waited with his hands in his coat pockets, the stillness of a man who has done the engineering and is waiting to see if the numbers are right. It took 42 minutes. The retrieval team stood down at 6:53. The agents dissolved back into the commuter crowd with the same unobservable efficiency with which they had appeared, and then the platform was just a platform again, fluorescent, cold, ordinary, smelling of steel and coffee, and the particular human smell of 1,000 daily transits. Hare shook Marcus's hand with both of his, briefly and deliberately, and said something in Vethara to Sira that Marcus couldn't translate but watched her close her eyes briefly at, the way people close their eyes when receiving something they needed to receive. Then Hare walked to the southbound train and boarded it, and did not exit at any stop that Marcus could subsequently account for. Sira stood in the middle of Platform 9 with her canvas tote bag on her shoulder and her earbuds around her neck, and looked at Marcus. "Precedent 9, she said, requires a minimum 2-year extended immersion period, with quarterly reporting to the Council and ongoing review conditions." "That seems reasonable," he said. "I will need to submit documentation of the continued research context." She was precise about this. "Which means I will need continued access to you, to your work, to your bridges. My committee found the bridge data unexpectedly significant." A pause. "They filed it under structural empathy as a uniquely Terran adaptive mechanism. 7 pages. "Tell your committee my bridges are honored," he said. She looked at him, the Winterwater eyes. "Marcus," she said. "Yes." "I want to stay." She said it plainly, all the protocol language gone. "Not for the research." He picked up her coffee cup from the platform bench. She'd set it down when the agents arrived and forgotten it, lukewarm, still almost full, because she had never quite made peace with the taste of it, and he held it out to her. "I know," he said. She took it with both hands. There is a particular quality to winter mornings in a city when the frost has come in overnight and nobody is up yet. The iron platform benches fur white. The breath of the few early arrivals hangs in the cold air. The sky above the river goes the color of deep water in winter, a color that doesn't quite have a name in any language Marcus knew of, though he was learning another language slowly, 2 letters a week, in which the color might eventually be nameable. On the last morning of that year, Marcus was reviewing site diagrams for the harbor footbridge, pedestrian only, too small to matter economically, designed for the cable curve that matched water over stone. The kind of bridge that got built when he was allowed to argue for beautiful as a structural value, which was more often now because his reputation had grown to the point where certain arguments were allowed to land. Sira was reading her book, the one in the old language. She had her feet up on the bench and she was actually reading it, not using it as a prop, and occasionally she made a very small sound that he had learned was her version of finding something interesting. The 7:42 arrived. He bought her coffee at the kiosk stop, and she took it with both hands and drank it and said it tastes less wrong than it used to, which he knew was the highest endorsement she had given it. He said progress, and she said methodically achieved progress, and he said is there any other kind, and she thought about it for exactly 4 seconds and laughed. The real one, the unguarded one. The one that made the other passengers look up from their phones and briefly smile without knowing why. The train went into the long tunnel under the river. In the dark, her hand found his. The faint, steady hum of her, warm and present, the signal he had felt in his back teeth before he knew what it was, before he knew what she was, before the list and the compass and the platform and the cold steel rail of a bridge over a river at the end of a year that had not turned out to be the year he had been expecting. He thought about what she had said on the bridge. 9 months on a planet with ground. He tightened his hand around hers. The tunnel was long and dark, and the train moved through it with the ordinary authority of a structure doing exactly what it was built to do, connecting a here to a there through something that couldn't be crossed directly, and somewhere ahead of them, the light. She told him about the transit card on a Sunday almost 3 years later, in his kitchen, on a morning when the city outside was doing the specific thing cities do after a significant snowfall. That brief white silence before the traffic comes back and reclaims the streets. She had gotten better at coffee. Not good at it exactly, but the grimace had graduated to a thoughtful frown, which he counted as a significant development. She'd gotten genuinely expert at most other things domestic, the geometry of stacking dishes, the logic of laundry sorting, the precise angle at which to leave a door open to signal that company was welcome without demanding it. She'd approached all of it with research thoroughness, and arrived at habits so natural they had long since stopped looking like research. He was reviewing structural drawings. She was at the table with her tea. She decided tea was more honest than coffee, which she described as a substance that performs energy without disclosing its methods, and her notebook, writing in the Vithara script he had learned enough of now to read slowly, the way you read a language you learned as an adult, with effort and pleasure. The card, she said, without preamble, in the way she said things when she'd been thinking about them for a while and had decided to say them. He looked up. The transit card in your mailbox. She looked at her tea. It was mine. He waited. I had been issued field equipment on arrival, and I couldn't get the card back into my kit without using a recalibration tool I'd left at the immersion station, and I couldn't leave it in the transit lost and found because the material composition would not have survived a cursory inspection. She paused. So I put it in the nearest residential mailbox, which was yours. He stared at her. It worked on your transit system because it was calibrated to function on any closed-loop electromagnetic access system within a compatible frequency range, which includes essentially all of your city's public transit infrastructure. She looked at him carefully. I was not targeting you specifically. I was resolving a logistics problem with the nearest available solution. You accidentally, he said slowly, put an alien transit card in my mailbox. Yes. And I used it. You used it, and then you boarded my train. She looked at her notebook. There are 19 documented cases in Vithara field history of accidental integration producing more significant xenosociological data than planned immersion protocols. My committee believes ours may be the 20th. She paused. I believe the word you use for this category of event is fate. We don't have that word. We have a word that means the structural inevitability of a well-designed system, finding its most efficient load path. He looked at her for a long time. At the winter-water eyes that had picked up, over 3 years, the very faint warmth of a city she had decided to stand on when she could have been anywhere in the catalogued galaxy. At her hands on the table, the hands that held everything with both of them. At the notebook full of a language older than Rome in which the color of winter river water might someday have a name. Your people, he said, are genuinely terrible at just saying fate. She considered this for exactly 4 seconds. She laughed. Outside, the city was coming back. Traffic, a bus, someone scraping ice from a car window with the specific rhythm of someone who would rather be inside. The first ordinary sounds of a world waking up on a planet with ground, doing the thing human cities do, connecting, moving, crossing the distances between where they were and where they needed to be. Marcus looked at his site drawings and thought about the footbridge, about the cable curve that matched water over stone, about the problem of crossing things you couldn't go through and the mathematics of the spaces in between. The load path had always been there. He just needed to listen for it. He found out about the broadcast entirely by accident, the way you find out about most structural problems, not because you went looking, but because the thing itself finally made a sound. It was a Thursday evening in late January, 3 weeks after the platform negotiation, the air in the city holding the particular bitterness of winter that has gone on too long, and Marcus was at his desk reviewing site specs when his second monitor, the one he used for reference materials, usually displaying building codes or material datasheets, flickered. The kind of flicker you associate with a loose connection, which he made a mental note to fix. He leaned over to tap the cable, and the screen cleared and showed him something that was not a building code. It was a broadcast, a transmission. A program, he understood after a moment, structured the way a television program is structured, with titles, with a presenter, with what appeared to be a live feed in a small corner of the frame. The presenter was a man in a pale jacket sitting at a desk that was too smooth to be made of anything he recognized, and the man was speaking in a language Marcus couldn't follow, but with the cadence and hand gestures of someone doing a news segment. The live feed in the corner was footage of a transit platform. Platform 9, Marcus realized, with the slightly sick recognition of seeing somewhere familiar in a context that had no business existing. The timestamp in the corner was running in real time. He sat very still for approximately 30 seconds. Then he took a photo of his screen and went to find Sierra. She was in the kitchen with her tea and her notebook, and when he put his phone down in front of her with the photo on screen, she looked at it for a moment with an expression he had not seen before, not the practiced neutrality and not the unguarded realness, but something between them and beneath both, something that looked like a person caught between shame and resignation. "That's TGOL," she said. "The game of life. There isn't a good translation. A live feed documentary program. It's been the most watched entertainment broadcast in this sector for approximately 300,000 continuous weeks." Marcus sat down. "They've been watching," he said. "The Vethara we don't have fiction the way your culture has fiction. We have documentation. We have observation. The whole concept of watching other species' lives as a primary form of entertainment emerged from the field immersion program about 30,000 years ago, and she stopped. "It became very popular. The Terran feed specifically has been running for longer than your written history. You are an extremely watchable species." "The presenter," Marcus said, "the man in the pale jacket." "Beale," she said. "He's the host of the Terran segment. He's been doing it for approximately 200 years. He finds the work less comfortable than he used to, from what I understand. The council won't let him leave." Marcus looked at the photo, looked at the live feed image of Platform 9 in the corner of the broadcast. "When I was standing on that platform," he said carefully, "arguing with the retrieval team, was that?" "Yes," she said, "that was being broadcast." He absorbed this. "How many viewers?" he said. She told him. He was quiet for a very long time. He got up and made coffee, which he didn't drink, just held. "Zero," he said. "Yes." "Was this part of the research protocol?" She looked at her notebook. The field immersion program was originally separate from the TGOL broadcast. Over time, the council began to integrate them. Field immersion data feeds directly into the live program. She paused. I want to tell you I didn't know this was happening. I knew it in the abstract. The way you know, in the abstract, that your data is being used by your government without your specific consent. That doesn't make you feel better," he said. "No. And me, my data, everything I said on that train, every conversation." "Yes," she said, "I know." He turned around. "Is it still broadcasting?" he said. "Right now, yes." He looked at the ceiling for a moment, at the unremarkable white plaster of his kitchen ceiling, at the smoke detector in the corner, at the ordinary physical reality of his apartment, and he thought about all of it as something being watched by an audience whose numbers were not in any vocabulary he had for audiences. Then he looked at her. She was not performing anything. She was sitting at his table with her hands flat on the open notebook and her eyes somewhere between colors, and she looked like someone waiting for a judgment they had decided, some time ago, they deserved. "Did you request to be on the program?" he said. "No." Did you volunteer any of it? No. Were you complicit in the broadcast of our conversations without my knowledge? She thought about this with more care than the question seemed to require. In that I knew the system existed and chose to conduct an immersion in a culture I knew was being broadcast, she said. Yes, passively. I didn't broadcast anything. I didn't choose to broadcast anything. I also didn't choose to disclose to you that the broadcast was happening, which she stopped. That was wrong. I should have told you. He drank his coffee, which was terrible. My committee, she said, has been pushing for a consent protocol for the Terran feed for 60 years. The Sovereign Council considers it impractical at the population scale. She paused. Beale has been pushing for it longer. I believe it's the main reason he wants to stop hosting. How do you turn it off? He said. Not for me specifically, for can it be turned off? For the Terran feed specifically. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. That's a significantly more complicated question than it appears. Answer it anyway. She told him. It took 40 minutes. Marcus asked questions, the engineering kind, specific and systematic, and she answered them. And by the end of it, he had a rough structural picture of something that was not a problem he could solve in a kitchen on a Thursday night, but was also not a problem without solutions. Your committee, he said, the 60 years of pushing for a consent protocol. Yes. Can you get me in front of them? She looked at him. Not to argue about the protocol, he said, to give them a data point they don't have. He paused. What does a human say, knowing they've been watched, if you ask them to decide for themselves whether to keep being watched? She was still. She said, that's actually a significant piece of data they don't have. I know, he said. That's why I'm offering. The committee hearing was 6 weeks later. Marcus gave testimony for an hour and a half via a communication system that Hare set up, and then deliberately malfunctioned twice before getting it to work, which Marcus suspected was intentional and which he chose not to address. He spoke about structural consent. He spoke about the difference between being observed and being known. He spoke about the specific human experience of privacy, not as secrecy, but as the condition under which genuine behavior occurs. The paradox that you cannot study authentic human behavior while broadcasting it, because observation changes the observed. He did not speak about Sira directly. He didn't need to. She was in the room, the virtual room, the transmission room, wherever the committee existed in the geometry of the ascendancy. And the committee knew what she was to him and what he was to her, and that was itself the data. The Terran feed consent protocol passed in committee 11 weeks later. It was not retroactive. It was not comprehensive. It was a beginning, and Marcus had spent enough of his career working on structures that required permits to understand that a beginning was what beginnings were for. Beale apparently wept, according to Hare, when he heard. Marcus looked up an archived clip of the man in the pale jacket doing a segment on a rainstorm in Edinburgh in 1987 and watched it and thought, 200 years. He sent Hare a message saying he thought Beale should get a long vacation. Hare sent back a symbol in Vethara that translated approximately as, working on it. There was a morning in the second spring after the frost was gone when Sira woke up early. She didn't sleep the same way Marcus did, fewer hours, lighter, a different architecture, and was gone when he surfaced, which was unusual. He found her on the small balcony outside his study, standing with both hands on the railing, looking at the city. The city in early morning light. Low haze over the river, pigeons on the wire across the street, a delivery truck making its first round, the distant rhythm of a bus on the main road. Ordinary urban sounds, the texture of a city at work before most of the people in it had come online. She was not doing anything. She was not reading or note-taking or working or performing any activity. She was just looking. He brought her tea. She took it with both hands. "Are you doing field research?" he said. "No," she said, "I'm just looking." He stood beside her at the railing and looked too. After a while she said, "My mother, the closest thing I have to a mother, it's a more distributed relationship in my framework. She was killed in the conflict. I was very young. I don't have a clear memory of her. What I have is a description of her that my keepers passed to me. They said she used to stand at the observation deck of the fleet ship and watch planetary surfaces when they passed them. Any planet, she'd just watch." He didn't say anything. "I thought I understood that when they told me," she said. "I didn't, I thought it was grief. The way your species stands at the grave of someone and looks at the earth above them." She looked at the city. "It wasn't grief, or not only. She just liked watching things that were alive." She paused. "I like watching things that are alive." He thought about the train, about all those mornings, both of them watching the car around them, the man asleep with his mouth open, the teenager doing homework, the woman with the DMV card. He thought about the way Sierra had described her work, watching the way people are with each other when nobody thinks anyone is watching. "She would have liked this planet," he said. "Yes," Sierra said, "she would have liked this planet very much." They stayed on the balcony until the city was fully awake around them and the pigeons had redistributed, and the delivery truck had finished its round, and the particular morning light that was not quite any color they had a name for had shifted into something more ordinary and bright. Then she went inside to make tea, and he went inside to review site drawings, and the day began the way days begin, without ceremony, without announcement, one moment simply becoming the next.